Spillane's pub was opened in 1875 by Tom Vaughan Spillane, who had just come home from the gold mines in Australia. And he cordoned off a bit of land and he opened what's called a shebeen.
Tom was born the eldest of 10 children at the end of the world in Gary William. While many neighbours were going to America, he chose to go a lot further. Australian ship records show 29-year-old labourer Tom sailing in 1870, and 5 years later, a 32-year-old Tom returning from Australia as a miner. Perhaps his fortune went up as his age went down? Having made his money in Australia, Tom came home and found himself a wife. He opened a Spillane's in 1875 and married Johanna, or Joni Moriarty, in 1877. As a Fahamore woman, maybe she gave some legitimacy to his property claims there.
Tom, who went to Australia and came back from Australia, probably in his early 30s, and started the pub and built the pub on a commonage. Now, the pub today is nothing like what he built, but the story was that he had to stay up at night with a shotgun to stop locals from knocking it down, because he was building it on a commonage and there was no pub around, and it was obviously something unusual. Now, is that true? It's half true. Tom Spillane was known as Tom Vaughan in later life because he seemingly had a big head of white hair, unlike myself, where I've very little.
My memory of Tom Vaughan is he sat at the kitchen in the chair. He always had his cane near him, and he had a head of white hair and a mustache, a big, like a beard. He reminded me of Santa Claus, always in the kitchen.
Tom Vaughan and Joni didn't have any children, and this is where Minnie Moriarty comes in.
My grandmother, Minnie, who was Mary Moriarty, born in Boston in about 1885, and her mother sadly died when she was a baby, and her father, who was Moss Moriarty, brought her home to be reared by his sister, who happened to be married to my granduncle Tom Spillane.
In 1906, at the age of 19, she married Michael Spillane, youngest brother of Tom Vaughan. Michael was in the Royal Irish Constabulary, along with 3 of his brothers, and he spent much of his time serving up the country. Minnie and Michael had 4 children: Mary Kate, Thomas, Morris and John T. Michael died in 1917, just a year after his youngest son was born, and Minnie was left to raise her family and run the pub by herself.
I remember Minnie. She was a wonderful woman. Any time anybody had any problem, they always went to Minnie, and she was right there. We witnessed it in our own home many times, you know. She was always there, willing to help. She knew everything. She stood at the door, and she looked up and down, and she really knew everything that went on in that village. She loved her snuff. You wouldn't know what snuff was. She had her little box of snuff in her pocket, and she'd always have her snuff ready. She was a great woman.
I was born in Maharees, in the Dingle Peninsula, in Spillane's pub in 1939.
Many happy memories back there with Minnie. It was wonderful. We used to go back every summer, and we loved being there. And I used to sleep with her when I was 4 years of age, and in a small bed, and she'd tell me, Michal, we'll say Deck of the Rosary, and then to put my hands down by my side and my legs straight for the whole night, and I'd get special blessings. So I did that. I slept like a log all night. She was very clever. The other one I remember was her clearing the pub. At night time, she'd go outside the counter, and there'd be Mike Enright and Jimmy Spillane, and she'd get over and stand beside them and chat with them. And then she'd put her arm around both our shoulders, and she'd chat with them all the ways to the door, pushing them to the door. And I caught myself many years later in John McDermotty, when I was getting lads to leave the presbytery with an open house, and I was doing exactly what she used to do. She was just She had a lovely way with the people. Great overall. She had great sense of humour, and she was well in control.
Grandmother Minnie, the original matriarch, she died in her chair. The same day I had refused to take the tank of milk which had come back from the creamery over to feed the calves. She probably wasn't impressed. Anyway, I don't know that I can be held responsible. I was only 5, so give me a break. Minnie, as she was known, ran the pub for years. And then, as time moved on, her eldest son, Thomas, worked in the pub and ran the pub and worked on the bit of land and did a bit of fishing. But then he emigrated to England and my father came back. My dad was John T. My mother was Hannah Courtney, and they got married in 1946, I believe. And my mother told the story that she was inside Neil's pub in Castle. It was the paper shop near the church. And she was asked, probably 1945, was she the girleen that was supposed to be going down to Maharees to marry John T. And she said she was. And whoever she was talking to anyway said, if you've any sense, you'll stay up in Dublin for yourself. And here we are, 80 years later. She came to Maharees. She had 5 children, 21 grandchildren, and I believe the 21st great-grandchild is on the way. So I was born upstairs. My brother Mike, Lord rest him, was born before me, a good bit. And then Mary Rose, Tom and Nora were supposedly born in Tralee.
Many of Spillane's long-standing customers will still remember the groceries that used to sit above the bar counter back in the day. We still have ledger books from 1870s and onwards, detailing the various groceries and hardware that people bought, not just from Fahamore, but from further afield around the parish. Some of the names live on in local families, but many others are long gone.
This is 1882. Quite interesting names. Pat Lynch, Ballygwyn, Kilchannig, Patrick Kenny Kilchannig. Quite a range of Bridget Murphy, Fahamore, Thomas Knightley. Never heard of Thomas Knightley. Patrick Cornan. All the different names that are just gone now. We don't. Mrs. Moore, Gary Willem. They're buying a stone of flour, 5.5 pounds of sugar, a stone of meal, sweets, a pint of oil, or 2 ounces of tobacco, a stone of meal, half pint of whiskey and a pint of oil, 2 glasses of whiskey. 1897, Mrs. Weaver, W-E-A-F-E-R, Scrogor, Joseph Ryan Scrogor. Mrs. Weaver is bread and sugar and candle, half pound candle, 18 mead, tea, mead, soap, starch, onions. So it's just quite a range. Meat, plug of tobacco. Just interesting. 1896. Mrs. Weaver, because she's quite doing a lot of shopping.
The cheese coming up from the shop, all sorts of shapes and sizes. The mice would come in the autumn, sample the cheese. Obviously, it couldn't be sold, couldn't be thrown out. So I think that's a fair enough reason why cheese isn't one of my favourite foods today. The boiling of an old hen. This hen was around for so many years, well past her laying days, thrown into a pot above in the kitchen, boiling there what seemed like a number of days. The smell in the kitchen was just unreal. Minnie was very active, and my memory of her was she was a strong-willed woman. She'd make me eat things I wouldn't be that fond of, and to this present day I still won't eat them. But that was Minnie, a great woman. Lots of memories from the kitchen table. 5 pairs, if you can imagine, small hands feeding Ling to our dog. Seemed every day during Lent to have the Ling on the table. The dog got sick of it, and we were certainly sick of it. I'd probably like it today, but anyway, another story. Dad trying to extract marrow from a bone of lamb. Now, I'm not sure what he was using, but he was sucking up this marrow, and obviously no statins to counter the cholesterol damage. Growing up in the pub was the only thing we knew. We went to the local school and we used to run home for our dinner, and somebody would always walk in. Maybe we were sitting down to the dinner and the next thing somebody had come in and somebody had to go down to the shop. But that's the way it was, and we didn't know any different. Working in the behind the bar, because the bar was only a tiny little space and we had the shop as well, and one of the big attractions across the road was the forge.
Funny story. Well, it wasn't very funny at the time. I remember we had a cow that was very sick, and I was sent back to John T's anyway, see if he had a remedy for her. And John T was the go-to man when I was growing up. The man that helped a lot of people around Maharees during tough times. But anyway, I headed off back, and John T was in the hallway at the entrance of the shop. And I told him my story. And he says, what complaint was the cow? And I said, she's stretched out and she's grunting. Now, his son Sean was up in the kitchen doing his lessons. And Sean pipes up and says, maybe she's turning into a pig. Where did this come from anyway? But I said to Sean, I was talking from experience. John T enjoyed it so much anyway, he gave me a bar of chocolate and a remedy for the cow, which worked out perfect. So I just went to see John T with a man that was held in high esteem and beyond. That's just one of the memories I have. Splans.
A nice man. In fact, we was making handy money at a time when we had no money. A shilling a bag for trimming onions in the field. We were delighted with it just because we had no money. My parents weren't dead, and my grandmother was only getting 17 and 6. But I knew he was a nice man.
I always thought Dad was a pioneer. Could never understand why a bottle of Guinness was being slipped back into the quiet back kitchen. Now I know it was purely medicinal.
Genty, I remember Genty and Anne very well. Whenever they went to town and I was home, she'd ask me to come in and, stay in the house.
One lasting memory I have of Spillane's and of Hannah's Spillane's is of that we used to go there in the evening time, at night time, and we'd play our game of 31. There was a group of us there that used to meet often, and it was a very enjoyable evening. Some of our friends that used to play the cartridges, unfortunately, are no longer with us. And there was nights, one particular night that sounded, we had laughs afterwards when we were very lazy leaving because we couldn't finish off our game. And Hannah had come out, God rest her. She came out many times just to ask us to leave. So she came out with a very good one. She came out with her rosary bead and she knelt down, and we ended up having to say the rosary with her. And there were a few other nights when the game used to not to be able to be finished, and Hannah would come out with her rosary bead. So we said a good few rosary as it turned out. With Hannah. We're very happy with this.
One memory I have was Sharon and myself going into Spillane's one night. It was pouring rain and cold in the winter. There was no one in, and Hannah came out, served us a couple of drinks, and then went back in the lounge. So we were just the two of us. So we said we'll finish the drinks and then we'll probably go home. But just before we finished, Maurice came in, Maurice Harrington, Sharon's cousin. And he had a big bag of prawns, Dublin Bay prawns that he got from a ship in Dingle. So he asked Anna, would she cook them for us? So she cooked them, and the four of us sat around the bar there, eating and enjoying them for about an hour. And then we had another drink, and then another drink. And then we went home, and we had a great night, really nice. Yeah.
Another fond memory I have of Hannah's Spillane is John and myself. We weren't married at all then, and we went in to get a mineral in the bar, and we came out in the front, and Hannah said to me, would you like to go in and sit down? The television is on and the Eurovision is on, And when she carried us up, the television was on and we sat there and we watched the Eurovision, the two of us. And that night Dana won. That memory is a very fond memory of us sitting there and watching. And when Dana won, of course, we were over the moon, and Hannah was delighted with us, and she was clapping away with us as well for that.
My dad, John T, died fairly suddenly in 1967. So my mum then, Hannah, was running the pub, and we were all giving a dig out during holidays, but it was a tough life for her.
I wish to pay a warm tribute to Mum. Widowed, with 5 kids and a business to run. It wasn't easy. She wasn't able to drive at the time, but she learned. Now, she found that very difficult, and I think there were a couple of clutches that needed repairing, but she stuck with it. She died far too young.
My mum was running the pub, and then brother Mike, who had gone to Canada and got lucky in Canada to meet his future wife, Marilyn, and they came back and took over in probably the early mid-70s. They took a brave leap and started food, and it has grown and developed, and Mike loved adding bits on every year to the point of where now it's world famous.